There is something very tender about this photograph from 1890. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, stands beside her mother, who is sitting in a fancy old chair. The girl's small hand rests gently in her mother's hand. At first glance, it looks like a simple portrait of a mother's love, a quiet moment shared between a mom and her daughter. But when experts examined this photo in 2024, they discovered something that turned this sweet image into something much sadder. Pay attention, because what this little child was doing and why the photo was taken is more heartbreaking than it seems. The photograph eventually ended up with a private collector in New York. Almost nothing was written on it, just Boston, 1,890 inches in faint ink on the back. No names, no studio stamp, just these two people captured in time. Their story was hidden, waiting to be discovered. The woman sits in a Victorian-style chair, the kind with carved wooden arms and a cloth back that was common in photo studios back then. She seems to be in her early 30s, although life in that era often made people look older than we expect. Her dark dress is plain but neatly made, with black lace around the neck and cuffs. Her hair is tightly pulled back, not a strand out of place, just like women wore it in that period. What catches your eye first is her face. There is something about the way she looks, or maybe it is the lack of expression that draws you in. She stares straight at the camera with a calm, quiet presence. People back then had to remain still for a long time. Yes, but her stillness feels different, deeper, almost unnatural. Her hands rest in her lap, one on top of the other, arranged carefully. Next to her stands a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, captured at that age when a child is still very young, but already hinting at the person she will become. She wears a white dress, the kind families chose for formal occasions or photos. It has delicate lace and details that must have taken hours to make. The girl stands very close to her mother's chair, slightly to the side, but clearly together. Her face is serious, like many children in old portraits, told not to smile or move. And then there is her hand. The girl's tiny hand rests in her mother's. It is a simple gesture that children and parents have shared forever, a child reaching for her mother's hand, seeking comfort, safety, and closeness. The arrangement is simple. Mother sitting, daughter standing next to her, holding hands. The painted backdrop shows a grand room or pillars, meant to appear impressive. The lighting is even, flat, the type photographers used in the 1890s with their basic tools. The photo itself shows the effects of 134 years. It has yellowed and browned with age. There are cracks, though not as severe as some other old photographs. Brown age spots and marks from air cover the surface. The edges are worn, yet the photo survived better than many from the same era. At first glance, it seems like a simple image of a mother and child. A quiet, tender moment, the little girl's hand resting in her mother's. There is a feeling of gentle love in the small gesture. Nothing in the immediate image suggests anything unusual. It looks like an ordinary old family portrait, just a mother and daughter holding hands, a moment preserved. But there is something you cannot immediately name, something in the woman's face, the unnatural stillness in how she sits, something in the child's face if you look closely. It is more than seriousness. It whispers that this photograph is not exactly what it seems. Alina Rodriguez had been restoring old photos for almost 30 years. When this one came to her studio, she had seen hundreds of family portraits from the 1890s. Formal, stiff, everyone in their best clothes, standing or sitting in studios. This one seemed ordinary at first, but something made her pause. Perhaps it was the way they were positioned, perhaps the woman's expression, or maybe just a gut feeling from decades of experience. Whatever it was, she decided to study the photo more closely. She began with a high-quality scan, then used infrared imaging, which can reveal details hidden beneath age and damage. That is, when the photo revealed something startling. The girl appeared first. Under the special camera, she moved slightly, just like a real child. Photographed in 1890, Alina said. Small natural movements, tiny shifts from trying to remain still. Then Alina looked at the mother. Under the infrared, The woman's form showed something Alina recognized from death photography. Living people, even when they hold still, have tiny changes. Dead subjects, prepared for photos, appear in a way that life cannot imitate. Zooming in on the mother's face, modern software revealed details that even the original photographer could not see. Her eyes showed the faint, cloudy appearance typical just hours after death. Slight, nearly invisible in a damaged photo, yet unmistakable once enhanced. Her face held impossible stillness. Not the stillness of a living person trying not to move, but of someone who could not move at all. No tiny expressions, no muscle changes. Just total, unnatural rigidity. Alina then examined the hands, the mother's hands, resting in her lap with the girl's small hand on top, were placed too perfectly. Living hands make tiny adjustments and respond to pressure. These did not. Every finger lay exactly as if positioned by someone else, as a funeral worker would do. Behind the chair, faint shadows of support stands, tools used in Victorian death photography, were barely visible, confirming what Alina suspected. The girl's hand struck me the most, Alina said. This little child, probably not understanding what was happening, holding her mother's hand for the photograph. Alina's notes read, main subject, mother deceased, daughter alive. Victorian post-mortem photography. Child instructed to hold dead mother's hand. She paused, looking at the image of a small girl holding on to someone who was already gone. The truth revealed by the restoration made the photo more heartbreaking, not less. Finding the mother's identity took weeks. Boston 1,890 inches offered little, but sometimes that is enough. A dress expert recognized the woman's unique mourning dress, traced to a Boston dressmaker, active in the late 1880s and early 1890s. Comparing this with local death records finally revealed her. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, born 1858 in Boston, married 1880 to James Mitchell, an office worker. One daughter, Emma, born July 1884. Sarah died in March 1890 at 31 years old. Her death certificate survives in a Massachusetts archive. Cause: tuberculosis, known then as consumption, the so-called White Plague. Tuberculosis was a slow killer. It often took months or years, weakening lungs and draining strength. People would cough blood, lose weight, and suffer fevers. Sarah had likely been ill for months, watched by her family helplessly, as medicine at the time had no cure. Rest, fresh air, and hope were all the doctors could offer. And hope was rarely enough. For the 6-year-old daughter, Emma, the photograph was likely her last chance to touch her mother's hand before she was gone forever. A small final connection captured in an image that would survive for more than a century. Emma. Those months must have been full of confusion and fear, watching her mother become thinner and weaker, not understanding why mommy could no longer play, could not lift her, could not do the everyday things mothers do. Families at that time often tried to shield children from the harsh reality of sickness and death, but in a small home, it was impossible to hide. Sarah passed away on March 15, 1890. She left behind her husband, James, and her daughter Emma, who had just turned 5 the previous July and was about to turn 6 that summer. Photographing Emma with her mother's body wasn't unusual for death customs of that era. Yet, it is especially heartbreaking with such a young child. James likely wanted Emma to have something tangible to remember her mother, proof that she had lived and loved her. The photograph was probably taken within a day of Sarah's death, most likely at a nearby studio. Sarah's body would have been prepared by the funeral director, washed, dressed in her finest black dress, hair neatly arranged, eyes gently closed. Supports were placed to hold her upright in the chair. Then Emma was brought in. Maybe she understood what was happening. Maybe she did not. At 6 years old, children can know that someone has died, yet often cannot fully grasp that it is forever. She was likely instructed to stand beside her mother's chair and hold her hand, to stay completely still while the camera captured the moment. 30 seconds, 45 seconds, perhaps longer. Emma stood there, hand in hand with her mother. One final touch. One last T connection before the burial. The photo was taken on March 16th or 17th, 1890. Sarah was laid to rest in Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge on March 18th, and Emma returned home to live with her father, now motherless at 5. With only this photograph to remember her mother, James never remarried. He raised Emma alone, with some help from his sister. Emma lived until 1962, passing away at 77. Family records show she kept this photo her entire life, even into old age. She remembered that day in the studio, standing beside her mother and holding her hand, not fully realizing she was saying goodbye. As we discovered more about them through archives, census records, city books, and letters that survived in an attic, the Mitchell family became real people, not just faces in a photo. James Mitchell had arrived in Boston from rural Vermont in 1878, seeking work like many young men of the time. He found a steady, respectable job as a clerk at a shipping company. By 1880, at 24, he earned enough to marry. Sarah Elizabeth Foster had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a tutor. She had more education than many women of her social class. She could read and write well, handle math, and play a little piano. When she married James in June 1880 at 22, friends described her as lively, intelligent, and practical. Their daughter Emma was born in July 1884, and by all accounts, they were a happy young family. Not wealthy, James's salary was modest, but sufficient. They lived in a good neighborhood, attended church regularly, had friends, and led a normal working-class life. Sarah likely developed tuberculosis sometime in 1888 or early 1889, though at first the symptoms may have been mistaken for something else, a persistent cough, fatigue, slight fevers. The disease was common in crowded city areas with poor sanitation and no effective medicine. By late 1889, it was clear something serious was wrong. Sarah coughed up blood, lost weight despite eating, and had recurring fevers. James hired a doctor, but there was little medicine could do other than keep her comfortable. Emma was 5, and her mother was dying. How do you explain to a child that someone who has been the center of their world is leaving and will never return? A letter from James's sister in February 1890 describes visiting the family. Sarah was now so thin she barely resembled herself. She tried to smile for Emma, but it exhausted her. Emma kept asking when Mama would feel better and wanted to climb into her bed. James himself looked like a shadow, trying to work, care for Sarah, and maintain a sense of normalcy for Emma. I do not know how they managed. Sarah passed on March 15th, 1890, awake nearly until the end. According to records, she had the chance to say goodbye to her husband and daughter, though what one says to a 5-year-old in such a moment is unimaginable. James arranged everything quickly, as shock often dictates. The funeral, the grave, the photograph. One last image of Emma with her mother. A letter James wrote to his brother 2 weeks after Sarah's death survives. He wrote, "Emma keeps after Sarah's death survives." He wrote, "Emma keeps asking when Mama is coming home. I have tried to explain, but she does not understand. Last night, she said, Mama looks so pretty and peaceful in the picture, as if she were just sleeping. I could not bring myself to tell her the truth. For now, I hold her when she cries and tell her Mama loved her very much." James raised Emma alone for the next few years, with his sister moving in to help. He never remarried, living until 1928, passing at 72. Family store tell that he kept Sarah's photo on his desk for life. The photograph shows his wife seated in a chair, their daughter beside her, hands joined. Emma grew up, married, and had children of her own, but she also kept the photo. That image of herself at 5, standing beside her mother, small hand in hers, one last touch preserved forever. I keep thinking about Emma's little hand, that tiny hand resting in her mother's. Such a simple gesture, yet children have reached for their parents' hands throughout history for comfort, connection, and security. The act of childhood trust. But Emma held a hand that could not return the squeeze or gentle pressure living hands give. She was touching her mother, but her mother could not respond. Did she understand? She was old enough to know something terrible had happened, yet young enough that the permanence of death might not make sense. Perhaps she thought her mother was sleeping, or would wake later. Or maybe, in the way children sometimes comprehend, she did understand. Maybe she knew this was goodbye, which is why she stood so close, hand in hand, one final touch. Victorian death photography is well known now. Families often created lasting images with deceased loved ones, yet there is something especially sad when very young children are included. Children too young to fully grasp what is happening, simply following adult instructions. Modern psychology shows that losing a parent at 5 leaves deep, lasting effects. Emma was at an age where she could remember her mother, but her memories would be fragmented, more feelings than facts. That photo may have been the clearest memory she had, standing beside her mother, holding her hand. James keeping the photo on his desk for 38 years, until his own death, shows the weight of that loss. Sarah was 31 when she died. They had been married less than 10 years. Widowers often remarried, especially with young children, but he did not. He raised Emma with help from his sister and kept the photo visible every day. What strikes me most is how ordinary they were. Not wealthy, famous, or historically significant, just a working-class family in Boston. A clerk, his wife, and their child. Thousands of families like them filled the city, living ordinary lives that history rarely remembers. But tuberculosis did not care about ordinariness. Disease never does. Sarah became ill and died. Emma lost her mother, James, lost his wife. They did what families then did. They took a photo, preserved the image, tried to hold on to what was gone. Looking at the photograph now, I see many things at once. Medical history, tuberculosis in 1890 Boston, old mourning customs, period dress, studio methods, camera technology, but mostly, I see a little girl holding her mother's hand, not realizing she is saying goodbye, just holding on because that is what children do. They reach for their parents' hands, trusting, seeking comfort. That hand in her mother's hand, a simple gesture of childhood, preserved in silver and light for over 134 years. Emma held on, not knowing she was already alone. And that photograph survived, carrying that single moment forward through more than a century. A small girl and her mother, hands held, one last touch that would endure a lifetime.